Hello everyone, this is Stacy Bresler from Archer Energy Solutions here with another episode of Direct Connect. We are going to talk about something really cool today about cyber warfare and how it relates to the energy sector. I have Steve Parker here with me again. He has always got some great insight to share with us, and we're going to get right to it. Interesting times we live in right now, with everything going on with Ukraine and conversations that we've had over the many decades, it seems like. Now, maybe that's one too many minis. But it's been quite a long time since we started talking about critical infrastructure in the energy sector and how it needs to be more secure because of the big, bad, old, evil Russia. And here we are talking about cyber warfare almost every day. You can't turn on the TV, you can't turn on the radio, you can't look at anything on the internet without seeing cyber warfare in Ukraine and Russia, and they're coming to get us. But I think the big thing to me, Steve, is what does that even mean? What does cyber warfare mean in actual war? A war that the United States isn't even in. Is this real? Is this something that can happen to us?
I don't know. Do we know the answer to that question? It's in some respects the whole situation with Ukraine. It's been a little anticlimactic, I think, because there was a lot of concern of, we've been hearing for years Russia's going to turn off the power grid, or someone's going to do this or someone's going to do that, and we haven't, at least in the U.S., seen any major impacts. There have been some things globally. There's been companies being hit, and there's other things going on, but at least from a public perspective, we're just not seeing major impacts. And I think it's a fair question to ask: is that because the capability is not there, or is it because those with the capability have chosen not to exercise that capability? And I don't know the answer to that necessarily, but it's a good question to ask.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people study this. A lot of people talk about it that are in the know more than you and I are. But if you read some of the things that are out there from people that we trust and have seen engaged in some of the closer to the reality situation, you almost get this feeling like it's really isn't going to happen. And it'd be kind of almost dumb for Putin to attack the United States because we might claim that as an act of war. I do know that that's been a conversation in the larger, the world talking about, whether that is an act of war or not. I think in NATO space, a lot of countries say that it wouldn't be an act of war if you did a cyber attack on them because nobody's bombing or getting killed or harmed. But I think in the United States, we might consider that an act of war. So it'd be kind of stupid, you would think, for Putin to attack the United States at this point.
Yeah, I think so. Given the way things have gone, I don't think he's in a position of strength necessarily. And on the one hand, I wonder if maybe cyber is the new nuclear, where no one's going nuclear, right? I know there's fear, there's concern about that, but that's a huge escalation that invites a catastrophic response. Maybe we'll see something similar with cyber. It becomes mutually assured destruction. But realistically, I think from a strategic perspective, cyber's still in play. Obviously NATO has not gotten directly involved in the Ukraine conflict. They were supporting Ukraine, sending weapons and probably providing intelligence and such. But not directly involved, and likewise, Russia has not directly attacked anything outside of Ukraine. What's most notable to me is within Ukraine, I was expecting that the internet would go down and other things would happen. I have to assume that Russia just doesn't have that capability. Why would they not? If they had the ability to take out communications, why would they not do that if they had the ability? So it's a little bit puzzling. I don't know, is it that they can't, or is that just they chose not to, and why would they choose not to? So it's been underwhelming.
Yeah. I was thinking, it wasn't too long ago, maybe this is, I can't remember how many years ago, 6, maybe 10 years ago, that, the country of Georgia got shut down from a cyber perspective to allow the Russian tanks to roll in. And they were able to do that relatively easily, but that's been a while ago. In cyber world, 5 to 6 years is a heck of a long time to learn from others' mistakes and have better protections in place. We've matured a lot in 6 years in the cyber world.
Well, and of course, Ukraine had their power turned off in a time of relative non-conflict, I guess I'd say. The conflict's been going on there since at least 2014, but not as much in the public eye. So what changed? Quite possibly they're doing more manual activities. They have redundancy, and they probably don't have remote access to their cyber assets as they did back in the past.
Well, there's a considerable amount of things to think about, in that regard. One of the things I kept on thinking about is, we worry about the attack when really the recovery is what we need to be best at. Because you can't anticipate exactly where things are going to happen. There's always going to be 0 days. There's going to be things that are, a state-sponsored attacking group of cyber attackers are going to have in their belt of tools that you don't know about, and you can't predict what that's going to be. Matter of fact, they could have bots in our systems right now, and we don't know that. But the recovery element is the most important. How do you recover? How do you get back on your feet as fast as possible? And I think we've got pretty good at that. In the electric sector and the energy sector, I think they've always been good at recovery of the electric system. Now that we're becoming more and more connected, I wonder how fast that can happen, whether we have those capabilities. I know we try to test them. We have standards such as the SIP-8 standards for electric sector. There's things happening in TSA. But are those good enough to keep the lights on? I think so. And again, like you said, you think it's underwhelming. I think it's not a strategic move for Putin to even attack the United States. From a United States perspective, I don't think we're going to see anything that's going to be unique outside of what we've seen, such as like the Colonial Pipeline, which are more bad actors versus state-sponsored actors, most likely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's fair. The concern that I have is that you can get into a false sense of complacency, thinking, oh, well, here we had an actual conflict, one of the, the most significant armed conflict in Europe since World War II, arguably, and it didn't spill over into the U.S. critical infrastructure from a cyber perspective. So, it can be easy to say, oh, well, this isn't going to happen. We don't need to really be concerned about it. Why are we putting all this effort into securing our systems? But that would be a concern. We don't want to get into that false sense of security. We want to, from a strategic perspective, we want to be secure. And there are a lot of other threats that are not state sponsored that can still hit us at some point. So I think the efforts that we're making to secure critical infrastructure still matter, are still relevant, and we need to keep on the path.
Yeah, and I think I was thinking about 20, 30 years ago when we started talking about cyber warfare, it was a pretty sexy thing to talk about, how all these horrible things are going to happen, and no longer would we have tanks and people on the ground shooting guns at each other. We were just going to do it on the internet and attack each other's resources, and that would be the way that we would do it. In reality, it's something that can help. I think you could bring down certain aspects of an infrastructure that is going to misdirect, maybe, or somewhat cripple a little bit whoever is being attacked. But it's not the primary focus. It's not the primary strategy for anything that's going to be involved in a war, from my perspective. But I might be wrong. Maybe we get there. Maybe we are there. Like you said, I don't think the capabilities exist, and I don't think it exists in the United States yet either, where we have the tools or the talent and skills to go out and just bring down, a whole electric grid of another country. There may be some parts of small little countries we could, but I don't think we can. I don't think we have that. I think we have ability to try, and maybe some luck is in play, and maybe there's some strategic things that we've done that we can leverage. But whole out cyber warfare is probably not there yet.
No, it's a strategic thing, right? It's part of the overall strategy of warfare. You can make the same case that air power or naval power, there's been a lot of talk about air power in Ukraine and the contested airspace, and should we have a no-fly zone or not? But the bottom line is, I think Russia discovered if you want to take over a country, you have to do it on the ground. Air is important, right? Navy's important. All those other things are important. Cyber is going to be an aspect that's important, but ultimately you gotta put boots on the ground, literally, and you got to get there and you got to take over. And that's where Russia was unable to do that.
Oh yeah, it's a tool could be an advantage or a disadvantage. I was thinking of what Elon Musk did for Ukraine by allowing them to have communications. That probably was a very huge help to the Ukraine army to be able to have full internet access through satellite services. I'm guessing that Russia would have preferred that not to be able to happen.
Perhaps, yeah. The information warfare aspect of it too. There was a lot of talk about misinformation, disinformation, open source intelligence. All those have been very interesting to me to follow that, and that's, I think it's an aspect of cyber. We normally think about a direct attack where someone's going to turn off the power, but there are other aspects of the cyberspace, information warfare, that are relevant as well.
It's kind of brought back to me a lot of the thoughts that we had when we first got into this industry. You and me, Steve, coming from a banking industry, getting into this world of SCADA where there was operations and there's automation and people's lives do depend on energy and such. And I remember that being the big interest for me was like, wow, I'm really protecting something that's super important, something that could really matter. A hospital might be without power for 2 weeks and people could die. So, doing the security around that, physical or cyber, was such an important aspect of what we were doing. And it still is. But when you get, war happening, talks about us, provoking and poking the bear per se, such as Russia, it makes you start thinking about, have we done enough? Or are we ready? Could we take on an all-out attack from Russia? In the cyberspace, would our grid withstand that? And I think a lot about that almost every day. And I kind of come to the conclusion that we can. At this point, I can't imagine anything that would be so dramatic that our grid would be down for weeks on end. I can just see small little pockets, possibly things that bring down parts of the grid for maybe a city or a part of a city for a little bit. Could be a worst case scenario that I come to, and even then, I think about the recovery of those has got to be relatively fast in today's world.
I would think so. I have a lot of faith in the industry. You and I, we've both been in the electric sector now for 2 decades, 20 years, Stacy. It's been a while. And we've seen events happen and we've seen recovery happen. One of the more remarkable ones that I recall was the tornado outbreak in the Tennessee Valley back, I think it was in 2011. And, TVA had a significant portion of their transmission system wiped out. And they put it back together in like a week or something. It was remarkable how quickly they put it back together. We have a lot of very dedicated people. We have dedicated engineers. And maybe we couldn't get it back to, full optimal operating condition, but getting enough of it back to, maintain civilization. Yeah, I think we can do that. I mean, Texas is another example. We saw that just last year. Texas had a very significant issue, and they got through it. I think it was an ugly period of time, but they got through it. And a cyber attack that causes outages, we'll see the same thing, right? We'll find a way to get enough power going to enough places to keep things together. I have confidence that would be the case.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that it would be anything so dramatic. I think the fears would exist. I think a lot of people have a lot of fear. I just this weekend I was talking to people that don't know anything about our industry other than they know there's an electric company that they have to pay to keep their electricity on, and just knowing what I do and being involved in that world, they actually have a lot of fear about this, and I think it'd be good for us to take a step back and think about that and help those that don't understand to decipher what they're hearing in the news, because you often hear the hyperboles come out, and you need to kind of bring that down to a level field where this isn't catastrophic. We can recover if something did happen. It's not the end of days in the cyber world and the cyber attacks. You're going to have your Facebook. It's going to be there, guaranteed. So don't worry. I think that's the message I was trying to tell everyone over the weekend is like, just take a breath. It's not that bad.
I think the more you know about how the grid works, two things. One, you realize how resilient it is, and you also realize what a miracle it is that it's actually working. And I know those are conflicting statements, but I think they're both true. It's an amazing, engineering marvel. But there's no off button, right? You don't go and you push they do that in the movies, but in real life, you can't just push a button and turn the grid off. You've got to push multiple buttons and probably at multiple different locations and different entities. So it's a non-trivial thing, perhaps.
There's no Bruce Willis moment.
No, turn grid off. Yes, no. Yeah, they don't build that prompt into the. I think you'd have to. Now you might have to push that many buttons if you got into the right control center and start, turning off transmission lines and cascade something. But it's also relatively easy to bring that back. We have plans to do that. Maybe it takes a few days, but we can do it. You mentioned the fear. I want to just touch on something, and I want to go back a few years. Actually, we're talking about what could the nation states do, and there's been a lot of talk over the years about Russia's in our grid already. You theorize that are we in other people's grids? What capabilities do we have? Do the nation states have? I'm going to read a quote. I pulled a quote. This was a report that came out in 2019. Actually, it was put together by the state of Connecticut, and they do an annual report that comes out of their meetings with their utilities, electric, water, and others within the state of Connecticut. And this was extremely well written. I'm just going to read it verbatim. It said, an unresolved question demanding federal attention is the distance between reported intelligence community assessments of the extent and depth of critical infrastructure cyber penetration and the fact that Connecticut utilities report no evidence of breaches despite serious, intense efforts to detect and deflect such penetration. So if American public utilities, including ours in Connecticut, are as compromised as intelligence community officials assert, and if those utilities, despite arduous, serious, good faith efforts to detect and eliminate threats, do not find evidence of penetration, they need and deserve U.S. government timely and detailed information sharing. Now, reading between the lines on that and kind of summarizing it, it's basically saying, okay, government, you say Russia's in our grid. We're looking and we haven't seen it, so put up or shut up. Again, this is about 3 years ago. But I loved it when it came out because this is a time when we were hearing it in the news, right? The constant drumbeat, Russia's on our grid, Russia's on our grid. Well, if they are, and the government knows it, tell us where they're at so we can get them out. So who's right there? I don't know. Does the government know things that they aren't sharing or can't share for some reason? Or is some of this a little bit overhyped? You be the judge.
A large part of our grid is not owned by the government. It's owned by private industry. And I don't know if private industry is incentivized enough to report anything they might know. Or, there's another side of this, or do they have the skill sets enough to be able to see anything? So there's an argument there too. But absolutely, that's a good point, Steve. It's put up or shut up. I think you're right. If it's such a big deal, and you seem to think that they're in our grid, show us. Show us.
Yeah, I think the concern probably supply chain. That's a big topic right now, and the concern's probably in the supply chain, right? Are there back doors in systems that we don't know about, or we do know about, we can't talk about for whatever reason? It's certainly possible. But speaking from a utility perspective.
Yeah. One of my favorite security professionals is Bruce Schneier. And what did he used to say? There is no security in obscurity. So if you're hiding something from me, there's no security that I can control. You can't hide the facts that something has happened. So the government does know something. they definitely should tell us. You're absolutely right. We need to know if if there are things inside of the Cisco and Juniper network devices that we have all over the place. Tell us. Let's rip them out and put in new ones, or fix it. Whatever we need to do. I think everybody would want to do that. It's in the best interest for everyone. But don't just keep on creating new regulations and telling us the bad boogeyman's coming to get us. Let's take care of the boogeyman if he's there. And if he's not, let's just do good standard security practices. It's an interesting time. There's so much going on. I knock on wood. We don't have an incident that could be traced back to anything that was devious from as a country as big as Russia. I think there are people that live in Russia. They're a haven for probably cybercrime. They're a haven for bad actors, usually to make money for themselves, I think, more so than to probably bring down our grid. But I definitely hope we don't see something. And if we do, like you said, I'm so comfortable in the fact that we can recover, very confident that we have the ability to restrain and constrain those potential issues that we really wouldn't feel it in a universal type of way.
Well, I think you have to believe that to believe the alternative that a nation state could cripple us and we would not be able to recover. That's kind of an unthinkable scenario. So think happy thoughts, but certainly continue to prepare for the worst.
No, you definitely have to think happy thoughts. Well, with that, I think I'm going to close out our call here today, our discussion. Anybody listening to this, if you have any comments, you know something that we don't know, put it in the comment field. Always like it. Share this if you get through the whole thing and you like what we're talking about, and share it with your friends. And if you have any other ideas, make sure you share those to us. We can bring some experts in and talk about certain things as well. So everyone have a good day, and thank you for joining us here at DirectConnect.
Stay up to date on all the videos we release here at Archer by clicking on the subscribe button. Click on the bell to be notified right away when we release new videos. If you know of a topic or someone you think we should talk to on DirectConnect, please let us know in the comments below.